The Atlanta Braves were founded in 1871 and are the oldest continuously operating professional sports franchise in America. After being in existence for over 150 years, there are countless unbelievable moments and monumental games from the team's history. This is the story of one of those games, as told by the people who were there. Behind the Braves presents The Day the Braves Caught Fire. As the 1993 Major League Baseball season neared, expectations around the Atlanta Braves had never been higher. Gone were the days of the team that spent most of the 1980s in last place. The 1991 worst-to-first Braves shocked the world by winning the National League pennant and fell just short of winning it all in an epic 7-game World Series versus the Minnesota Twins. The 1992 Braves proved that the previous season had been no fluke as they won their second consecutive National League pennant. And while they would fall short again in the World Series, this time to the Toronto Blue Jays, one thing was for certain. The Atlanta Braves had become a perennial World Series contender. Upon the conclusion of the 92 season, Braves general manager John Schuerholz set out to make an already elite team even better. He sent shockwaves throughout the baseball world by signing Greg Maddux, who at the time was arguably the best pitcher in the game. But there was more work to be done. Former Atlanta Journal-Constitution Braves beat writer I.J. Rosenberg.
Well, a couple of things happened. First, of course, they picked up Greg Maddux. I think that, John Schuerholz, the general manager, was looking for one more big arm. I don't think that at the beginning with Maddux that he felt he had any chance at getting him. And actually, Maddux took less money to come to the Braves. So he was able to fill a big role, whether it was the first starter, second starter, or third starter, it didn't matter. And I think the other big thing going into the season, when they analyzed both 91 and 92 and what had happened in both of those World Series, Minnesota, they should have won. Made a bad base running mistake, but there were other things in that series that happened offensively that they just couldn't push across the plate in their losses. And then I think in 92, Toronto was the better team, and they were the better team because they had the better hitting.
Braves outfielder Ron Gant.
1991, we make it to the World Series. A World Series I still to this day think we should have won. I still think we were the better team, but we lost to the Twins in that World Series. We go back to the World Series in 92 and we lose to the Blue Jays. So we knew that we had the pieces on the ball club to be able to make a run and get back to the World Series and have that chance to try to win one.
Pitcher Greg McMichael.
This team had a lot riding on it. I mean, think about we went and got the top free agent, Greg Maddux, and you had a star-studded team as well that had been in the World Series the last 2 years. So I believe, I didn't feel it as much because I was a rookie, but I knew kind of being around the guys that there was a lot of pressure on them because they didn't close the deal in 91, 92. And here we had a team that was better than those teams. And so I think going into the season, we felt like that we had something to prove, but also we were expected to win and win a lot.
As the season reached its halfway point, the Braves were sputtering. Their pitching staff was performing well as expected, but the offense, well, night after night, it seemed as though they couldn't get the big hit that they needed to push that winning run across the plate. As a result, the Braves had fallen to second place in the National League West standings, trailing the San Francisco Giants, and the deficit seemed to grow with each passing day. Their lineup needed a spark, and they needed it soon before it was too late. A fact that Ron Gant remembers well.
The middle of that 93 season, we were basically a 500 team. We were kind of underperforming as far as all the good pieces that we had and the pitching staff.
Greg McMichael.
Yeah, I don't think it was our pitching staff. It definitely was, we were losing games, but not by much. And if you look at that lineup from, top to bottom, there was definitely a need for something in the middle that was anchoring. I mean, of course, you had David Justice and you had Ron Gant, and Terry Pendleton, but really that was it. I mean, you think about catching was Olson and Berryhill, and Sid was at first, and and Blauser and Lemke and Otis. So nothing that was scary, right? Like, you look at teams, a lot of times they have somebody in the middle, and that person's scary. And of course, Ron was good, and David, but they needed some help. And of course, that requires, when you only have 4 guys, that requires that all 4 of them be on. And I think they just, we got off to a slow start. I think the pitching was still pretty good, and but we definitely need, when you compare to what's going on today in today's game, back then it was pitching and defense, and we definitely had those things, but it just seemed like we weren't together. The hitting wasn't timely. A lot of times when you're winning ball games, you're winning 3-2, 2-1, 4-3, you have timely hitting along with the good pitch and the defense. And we had the pitch and defense, but the timely hitting wasn't happening. So we needed a jump start. And I think we all felt that. We were kind of frustrated. Dang, we got behind 10 games. And because the Giants were rolling along pretty good, and they had everything clicking. And they were clicking more on the offensive side, and they had timely pitching. And we were just kind of missing a beat. And give John and Bobby a lot of credit, because they knew it. We knew it. We, as players, you just can't do anything about it, right? You try, but it requires somebody coming in from the outside, and that's where John and Bobby were so good.
Braves general manager John Schuerholz.
It was easy for me to see, and anybody watching our team, we had a lot of guys, Ron Gant, David Justice, Ryan Klesko, who wanted to be the cleanup hitter because we didn't have one. We didn't have a pure cleanup hitter. And they would get into that spot in the lineup, and they would have to think that you got to hit a little harder and swing a little bit more and drive the ball a little further. And it took them out of the game.
John Schuerholz began working on finding the right piece to fix his team's lineup. And while there were many players' names being rumored as potential trade targets, one stood out above the rest. San Diego Padres first baseman Fred McGriff. I.J. Rosenberg.
They were trailing. The Giants were better, and, the Braves had to play chase the whole season. And I think by then, that point of the season, it was, I can't tell you exactly how many games they were behind, but it was like somewhere between 5 or 7 games behind. I think they were behind like 7 or 8 at the All-Star break. So they knew they had to bring in a big hitter, and I think John had been working on that trade. Everybody liked McGriff. We had started writing about McGriff, that he was somebody that they were looking for.
Braves broadcaster Joe Simpson.
My recollection was there were other players out there, not just Fred, but there were some other players maybe that rumors had it that Braves had their eyes on, but the guy that was top of the list was Fred McGriff, because he hit 35 homers a year. He drove in 100 runs a year. To add him to the Braves lineup was like fairy tale stuff. There's no way we can get him. And then it happened.
On July 18th, 1993, the Atlanta Braves acquired Fred McGriff from the struggling San Diego Padres in exchange for minor league players Melvin Nieves, Donnie Elliott, and Vince Moore. 2 days later, on July 20th, the stage was set for McGriff to make his Braves debut against the St. Louis Cardinals. Ron Gant.
And so that night of the fire, that day, trading for Fred McGriff, we felt like he was that missing piece that was going to make this thing tick and explode, basically.
John Schuerholz.
And once we got Freddie, the thing that was the most impactful on that was how he set up the entire lineup. We were able to put everybody in their exact place in the lineup, and Freddie went comfortably into the number 4 spot.
Outfielder David Justice.
I knew we got Fred that day, okay? So I remember how exciting that was, because I knew what an addition that was going to be for our lineup, putting him in between Ronnie Gant and myself.
Fred McGriff.
When I joined that team, we were 10 games out of first place, and I got traded from the Padres, and I come over there, and they're like, "Oh man, Fred, the Padres, y'all had such a good team." And then they decided to tear it up. And so in the middle year, we're 10 games back, and so it's like, come on, we need some help.
With first pitch for that night's game set for 7:40 p.m., excitement for Fred McGriff's debut steadily built that afternoon all around Atlanta. As batting practice began, fans, members of the press, and McGriff's new teammates all eagerly awaited the first sight of him in his new uniform. But shortly before 6 o'clock, something else began brewing that attracted the attention of everybody in Atlanta-Fulton County Stadium. Ron Gant.
We were actually on the field taking batting practice that day. It was a normal day, except for we knew that we were getting Fred McGriff. Everybody was excited about it. There was a lot of buzz around, even not just the players on the team, but even the workers at the ballpark. I remember, talking to a couple of the ushers there, and they were like, I can't believe we're getting Fred McGriff from the Padres, man. And I was like, yeah, this is going to be good. Everybody was excited.
I.J. Rosenberg.
I was standing down by the third base dugout, and I was talking to a couple of St. Louis players, and before we started seeing smoke or something, somebody had said that they think that there's a fire in the press box. And what we found out later, of course, was it started in the, I don't know if it was a radio booth or the TV booth, but it was the booth sitting next to the main press box. And then all of a sudden we started to see a little bit of smoke. And then, this thing moved pretty quickly.
Greg McMichael.
I remember going out for batting practice like always. That was the time where the pitchers would, we called it feel and touch. So we had our throwing partners. My throwing partner was Steve Avery, went out there. And so I remember doing, our little game of catch, Steve and I, after BP. And then we're shagging and we're watching groups, 1, 2, 3. And all of a sudden we start seeing some smoke up there in the press box, and we're like, hey, look at that. I wonder what's going on up there. And that's odd, and we're all just kind of looking at it. And we nothing's really changed. It's that, we're changing our perspective between the balls coming at us, catching them, throwing them in, and looking at the smoke. And then a few of us got together and started talking about, God, it's getting worse. What's going on?
Second baseman, Mark Lemke.
We're just in batting practice, and somebody had caught a glimpse of it and just pointed up, and there's just a small fire, and you figure it's going to get put out. We had no doubt. They'll jump all over it, put it out, be a done deal, and it won't even be talked about. And it just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And, I guess there was a lock on the door going into one of the suites, and no one could get in there. And it just kept building and building, and to the point where it was starting to get warm on the field from the fire. Even though it was hot in Atlanta, it was getting hotter.
Ron Gant.
We're in the middle of batting practice. All of a sudden, we start seeing the smoke coming from the press box, and no one really knew what it was at first, but it kept getting bigger and heavier, and the smoke kept getting darker, and we were like, man, this is not good. So eventually it got so big that it just, half of that section of the stadium pretty much was on fire.
Pitcher, Greg Maddux.
I just remember standing in left field, and we're sitting there, and you kind of see, like, is that a fire? And you're like, yeah, it looks like a little bit of a fire going on up there. And, no big deal. No reason to stop BP or anything. It's just a small fire. And all of a sudden, 5 minutes later, you kind of heard the boom or something happen, and it just kind of ignited, and then it was a fire.
David Justice.
I think I was right there when the fire first started. I was just standing there looking. We're like, man, it's a fire. Then all of a sudden it was like, man, that's a fire, like for real. Like it was on fire. And then we're just standing there just waiting to see the fire trucks or somebody come. Nobody was coming, right? So then, but I'd already had my exit route. I was going to run out through right field. I know it wasn't going to burn the stadium down before I got out of right field. So I was comfortable knowing that I could get away, but it was amazing to sit and watch it.
Pitcher, Tom Glavine.
So I was pitching that day, and in the old stadium they had what was then our video room, which was very archaic, was in the very back of the stadium, behind the training room. So literally you're in the bowels of the stadium. And I remember being back there, and I was watching some video or watching something, and they've got all the monitors are back there with all the camera feeds throughout the ballpark. And I wasn't really paying attention to the cameras, but I was watching some video or doing whatever, and the next thing I know, I forget who it was, comes back there and says, the stadium's on fire. And I was like, what? So sure enough, I look on one of the monitors, and on that small little TV, which maybe was an 8-inch TV, it looks like it's a raging fire, right? And I'm like, oh my God. But then you're thinking in the back of your mind, this is a stadium, it's concrete. What can burn, right? So I go running out there on the field, and sure enough, I mean, there is just smoke billowing everywhere. I mean, and it's that dark, black smoke. And you look up at the press box, and the flames are coming out of the press box window, kind of rolling over the top of the facade above it. And it's just like, oh my God, what's going on?
While players and personnel on the field watched in shock, media members and broadcasters who were working in the press box area quickly began to realize that they needed to escape. Sportscaster Steve Taylor.
I was the sports director at WGNX, the call letters in, and we would do live shots before practically every home game. So I was out there a couple of hours early to get set up when the fire struck. And we heard the commotion of fire, and our camera woman, Carol Persley, who was the daughter-in-law of Dave Persley, the trainer at the time, hung right in there, got the video, and then we headed for the door. They pushed us out, and there was just about a 3-second feeling of panic going through that smoke, like, when is this going to end? And finally we got to some fresh air. But just for a second, I wondered how much this had been engulfed and was, in big trouble. We scurried our way out. In fact, Carol tells me I wanted to go back for the tripod, and she talked me out of that. So I guess the station had to take a $100 bite on that one.
Joe Simpson.
Let me kind of draw this picture of the press box at Atlanta-Fulton County Stadium. It was very circular, where you could sit in one booth and see across into other booths. And the partitions were, generally speaking, glass, so you could see through various booths. In those days, TBS and radio shared the broadcasters. For 4.5 innings on that particular day, Skip and I were going to be opening on TV, and then in the middle of the 5th inning, we would go to radio and finish the game over there. So when I got to the ballpark, I got all my stuff out on the TV side, scorebook and all that stuff, and then I took my briefcase around to the radio booth, because that's where I was going to finish up, and left my briefcase there. So my first notice of what was going on was sitting in the TV booth, where I could see smoke coming out of the radio, or of the booth right next to the radio booth, which happened to be John Schuerholz's private booth. I didn't know what was going on, and at first it was just a little smoke belching out of there, and it didn't seem like that big a deal. And then it became a very big deal. They had some food trays in there that had the sterno under them that was keeping the food warm. I think the wind blew one of the curtains in that room into the sterno that started it all, and it became a fully engulfed fire. So when the smoke started turning really black and belching out, I got up, grabbed my stuff, ran down to the radio booth, and grabbed my briefcase. By the time I grabbed my briefcase and I came out of the radio booth, I couldn't see. And I had to get down really low, not quite on my hands and knees, but I had to get really low to see my way out of the main exit out of the press box. That's how quickly it engulfed that. And I'm not talking about flames, I'm just talking about black smoke. You could not see your hand in front of your face. So, got my act together a little bit once I got outside the main press box door and went to the elevator to go downstairs. And I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't know if the stadium was going to burn down. I didn't know how bad it was going to be. But I got down to the clubhouse, went in the dugout, went out on the field where I could look back up to see what was going on up in the press box. And it was going on. Flames coming out, wrapping around the upper deck.
I.J. Rosenberg.
And then what happened, I was standing next to Joe Torre, and we were just talking. All of a sudden, one of the beams exploded.
Greg McMichael.
And all of a sudden, boom, there was an explosion, and we all felt it. It was like it hit us, and we started backing up to the warning track. And we started backing up further and further, and the flames got bigger, and we're like, oh my gosh, we've never seen anything like this.
It had gotten so hot up in the booth that, one of the old steel beams exploded, and it was like a bomb went off.
IJ isn't kidding. Here is the actual audio of the explosion. Joe Simpson.
One of the beams in the stadium had gotten so hot that it just blew up, basically. It separated from wherever it was welded, and that was really scary.
I.J. Rosenberg.
That was when everybody ran to center field. I mean, we're lucky that the beam didn't blow out, it blew in. So a lot of the shrapnel ended up in the Braves announcement booth and in the press box. But I'll never forget that sound. I mean, it was truly like a bomb blowing up. And I was kidding Joe Torre afterwards because Joe says he hasn't run that fast in years since he played. But we all got out to center field and turned around, and I mean it was just raging. And at that point, they did not ask us to leave the field. So at that point, for myself, I was talking to different players, and I talked to Bobby Cox. I remember getting him on the report for WSB, but it was serious. At that point, we knew it was serious. And then all of a sudden, you started to see the water, putting it out. It took them a while to put it out.
Joe Simpson.
Then there are firemen who had made the scene by that time, who were walking out on a little ledge from our radio booth to try to get some water into that area where the fire was really going strong. And they were precariously hanging, wrapping around the walls to try to spray some water in there to ultimately put it out.
While the fire was obviously a serious matter, Braves players on the field, such as Mark Lemke and shortstop Jeff Blauser, still managed to find a little bit of humor in the whole situation, mainly in the form of some candid photography. Tom Glavine.
We're playing the Cardinals, and we're all on the field kind of just watching this thing. And the greatest picture of all time was taken during that fire with Blauser and Lemke, which was fantastic.
Pitcher, Steve Avery.
The thing I remember most about it is the picture that I have, I saw of Blauser and Lemke. They were standing on the field, and somebody came down and took their picture with the fire in the background, and then they got their arms around each other. It was one of the best pictures I've ever seen.
Greg Maddux.
And I remember a month or two later seeing one of the greatest baseball pictures I've ever saw of Blauser.
With the fire in the background.
Fire in the background. They're just hanging out like, hey.
Mark Lemke.
Me and Blauser had Walter Victor, who was the team photographer, Walter Victor, take a photo of us with it going pretty good at this time now. We get done with that picture, not even really thinking how it's going to come out or whatnot. We just thought we'd just a couple of goofballs, just take a picture. And we got done with that picture, I'd say within 3 to 5 minutes, there was a huge explosion. Something blew up. Both teams, it was the Cardinals we were playing that day, were out in center field. That thing blew up. I thought the stadium was going to blow up. I really did.
I.J. Rosenberg.
Lemke and Blauser took the great shot. Walter, who was, part of the team, he was part of the Braves family, took that great picture. And at that point, the fire is really starting to get out of control. And if you look at the picture, you have to say to yourself, was that a smart thing for Mark and Jeff to do? But that was typical Mark and Jeff. I can't even tell you in the clubhouse what went on. They were back in the corner of the Fulton County locker room or clubhouse for the Braves. And, they did all kind of pictures. It was crazy, those two guys. So it wasn't surprising that they were the ones that took that picture.
Joe Simpson.
Jeff Blauser and Mark Lemke, arm in arm with the blaze going on behind them. That is one that ought to be in the Braves Hall of Fame somewhere. It was such a classic photo.
Meanwhile, Ron Gant also decided to take part in the photo fun by posing in front of the raging fire with both arms raised high in the air, a bat in his left hand, and a giant laughing smile painted across his face.
One of the things I do remember about right before I took that photo, I believe I was doing an interview with Jeff Hollinger, and that's when the explosion happened, and we were both like, "All right, man, I'll see you," and we kind of started walking towards the outfield. But Walter, our photographer, was snapping photos. So I was like, I have to get a photo of this. And the reason why I took the photo like that, is because I knew it was a huge day because we were getting Fred McGriff. But I was like, how could this happen on the same day that we do make this trade? And that's why I kind of had my hands up in the air.
Having retreated from the press box and onto the field, Joe Simpson looked on in amazement at the now destroyed area from which he was supposed to broadcast that night's game. He shares that memory with, perhaps, a little bit of help from his late broadcasting partner, Pete Van Wieren.
At that time, Ted Turner and Jane Fonda were an item. And I was standing next to Jane on the field and this is hours before the game was going to start, but she was there, and so was Ted, and she was talking about the fire, and she goes, "Oh my gosh, that's where you work, isn't it?" I said, "Yes, it is." And as we are doing this taping, Pete Van Wieren just fell off the wall. So I think it's his way of saying, his picture falling off the wall is him saying, "That's exactly right, Joe." Anyway, Jane says, "Oh my gosh, that's where you work, isn't it?" I said, "Yeah, it was."
With the Atlanta Fire Department having successfully distinguished the fire, the question now became, would the game be played? The game was originally set to begin at 7:40 p.m., but when 7:40 rolled around, that decision had yet to be made. Baseball fans all across the world tuned in to TBS at 7:40 Eastern Time, expecting to watch that night's Braves-Cardinals game. Instead, they were greeted with a live shot of Joe Simpson and Skip Caray standing on the field at Atlanta-Fulton County Stadium to deliver an update on what had transpired that afternoon.
Hello again, everybody. Along with Joe Simpson, Skip Caray, back with you at the ballpark, where so far tonight, no baseball. You can see the fire inspectors upstairs working to determine whether or not there will be baseball tonight. Joe, it was a scary moment about 10 to 6 tonight, huh?
When all the smoke started belching out of one of the luxury boxes upstairs, it was a pretty ugly scene, and needless to say, everybody was a little frightened. A loud explosion coming out of the booth right next to where John Schuerholz normally sits. And then it spread over to our radio booth, and it was completely engulfed in flames. We lost all our radio equipment, of course, for our radio broadcast, and we'll have to make other arrangements for that, certainly tonight, if we're able to get this game underway.
And the point there is nobody really knows yet whether there'll be baseball tonight or not. The fire inspectors are still doing their job, and you certainly can't rush those people in that important undertaking. As soon as they know, they'll let us know, and as soon as we know, you'll be the next to know. As you know, Fred McGriff was slated to make his Atlanta debut tonight. We don't know what the deal is. We'll let you know as soon as we do. We can point out to you again that no one was hurt or killed in this fire, which could have been much more serious and would have been really if it had happened at 7 or 7:30.
That would have been an absolutely horrible thing to witness, I'm afraid. And the smoke was really the problem. The smoke filled up the press box area. Everybody was really rushing to get out of there, and I'm just glad that there wasn't a big congested area outside the press box so that everybody could move freely.
We can tell you that if there is baseball, 2 or 3 sections back behind home plate have been blocked off, and fans will not be allowed to sit there tonight, but that's all we know at this point. We don't know if the game will be played or not. We do know the Giants won their game today, so the Braves are 9.5 games out. 8-3 was the final score. Bill Swift won his 13th game of the year. All in the Family comes along next on TBS, and then we'll be back with an update.
While fans at home waited out the delay with reruns of Archie Bunker, players and personnel at the ballpark still did not know if baseball would be played that night. Pitcher John Smoltz.
You're in disbelief, obviously. I mean, that's the last thing you think is going to happen when you're standing outside getting ready for a big league game. And of course, we got the news that we just pulled off a major trade, and all the things that came with that day. I look back and I can see the flames like it was yesterday out of the press box, and didn't know if we were going to play the game, right? There was some uncertainty on whether we were going to play the game or not. And I think everyone's just kind of waiting around to figure out what was going to go on.
I.J. Rosenberg.
And at that point, I remember calling my wife saying, there's no way they're going to play this game. But the Braves president back then was Stan Kasten. And of course, McGriff, it was a big night. They had, I don't know if they had sold the place out, but they were going to have 40,000 people there. And, basically the situation with Stan was, he said, play the game.
Hello again, everybody. Skip Caray back with you at the ballpark in Atlanta, where we have some news as of now, and the fire marshal still isn't 100% sure. But barring any last-minute discovery of some structural damage, it appears that this game will start between 9:30 and 9:45. That's what they're shooting for now. So we're going to operate on the assumption that this game will be played. You saw the fire marshal and Reggie Williams, who heads up the stadium authority, Stan Kasten, John Schuerholz, all the gang trying to work this out. Some sections, mostly behind home plate, have been closed off, and that's the reason why you see the fire that hit us about 10 minutes to 6 tonight. It was a scary thing, but there were no injuries. But there's apparently no structural damage. If there is, trust me, they won't play the game. But they're going to try to play it, and our best estimate is somewhere between 9:30, probably closer to 9:45. The game will be played, and maybe we have a little extra news. Here's the president of the team, Stan Kasten. What's up?
We just met with the fire marshal and the building inspector. Everything is fine. He's walking it one last time. We expect to get definitive clearance in 5 minutes, and hopefully we'll have a first pitch at 9:40, maybe 9:30, something like that. That's what we're pushing for right now. Looks like we're a go.
Great, Stan. Thanks.
Okay,
that's straight. No offense intended, but straight from the horse's mouth. Game will start between 9:30 and 9:45, and it looks very good. But it wouldn't be right this time of the night after a 2-hour fire delay if we didn't let you hear a little and see a little of Andy Griffith. Then we'll be back somewhere in this ballpark to try to broadcast a game for you.
With the decision now having been made for the game to be played, the next question for sports writers and broadcasters alike was, how are they going to cover this game? And with what? After all, they had to assume that any belongings of theirs that they had left behind in the press box would be reduced to nothing but ashes. I.J. Rosenberg.
Usually I would get to the park about 2:45, 3 o'clock. And, I would go upstairs to the press box. And I had the seat because, I was the Atlanta Journal-Constitution beat writer. So we had the seats right behind the plate in the press box. And I'd put my bag down. And sometimes I would take the time to set my computer up. But this time I didn't. And I was very fortunate not to. And I left I put my backpack on the table and then got my notebook and my recorder and went downstairs. After watching what happened, I thought in no way my stuff was going to either burn up or melt. So finally they got it out and the fire chief cleared it. And we went up there and I remember walking through and the whole press box was just burnt. And I walked outside and on the table was my bag and it was wet, but I picked it up, got out of there. They told us, get your stuff. If it's still there, get out. And I took it out of the press box, and somehow, some way, the computer, everything inside had not gotten wet. At that point, we were told that we were going to work on the club level right next door to the press box. And, we were just riding away, and I was, I sat with it on my lap, and somehow, some way, that battery lasted because I don't think there was any outlets around. Nobody had any extension cords.
Much like IJ's computer, broadcaster Pete Van Wieren's scorebook was also left in the press box, and he was certain that it would be destroyed. Van Wieren shared his story later that evening alongside his broadcasting partner, Don Sutton.
When we were told to get your personal stuff and get out of here, we grabbed up everything we could. I left my scorebook over in that press lounge.
And you see what happened to the press box, so you got to figure that's ashes.
But just as on a lark, I thought after the fire was out to go back in there and see what was left of it. It's perfect. There's a little dust on it. It's got a plastic cover, and it's cardboard and paper.
What they're thinking of doing is the new press box are going to build out of the material that
they ought to. They ought to. I couldn't believe it. Glass and water all over the place, and there sat my scorebook dry as a bone.
Perhaps the biggest challenge in the ballpark that night belonged to the Braves broadcasting crew. Doing a couple of live shots on the field earlier in the evening was one thing. But producing and broadcasting an entire game with no TV or radio booths and limited equipment? Well, that was going to be tough. Joe Simpson.
Everybody thought the game would be postponed, naturally. Ted Turner insisted that the game go on. Let the show go on. And that put a scramble mode on Glenn Diamond, the producer, and all the people at TBS that work behind the scenes in the truck to figure out how in the heck are we going to do this. So they began to work on that. They set up an area on the same level as the press box, but in the stands. Set up some tables on the tops of chairs, and we're fixing it up so that we could sit in a bleacher seat and work off this table. So it was pretty cool in that all the engineers and all of the technicians put this together to get us on the air. Was not easy. A side note to this was that Don Sutton left. he knew we weren't going to play. And he went to a restaurant downtown, one of his favorite hangouts, and went down and had dinner and had a glass of wine or two. And finally, when it was getting close to, we're actually going to do this, Glenn Diamond called Don and said, "Where are you?" And he said, "I'm at the so-and-so restaurant." And he went, "Well, we're going to put the game on. We need you to come back." So Don was in shock, but he got back and got there in time to be involved in the broadcast, and the show did go on.
With the fire long gone and everyone preparing for the game, the attention began to focus back on the Braves' debut of Fred McGriff. And while McGriff was eager to get started with his new team, he wasn't sure he was quite ready to play.
It was quite interesting because when I was in San Diego, probably 2 weeks before that, we had a big brawl in Sheffield. I was playing with Gary Sheffield in San Diego, and Sheffield hit 2 home runs off this pitcher named Trevor Wilson with the Giants, right? And so Sheffield was hitting in front of me, okay? And the pitcher, he hits me, right? So everybody in the ballpark knows that it was on purpose. And so I charged the mound, and everything, but trying to throw a punch, I hurt my rib cage, right? So now I hurt my rib cage. So now I got suspended for a few days, but the Padres took care of it for me. But anyways, now I get traded, right? So Schuerholz calls me and says, "Yeah, Fred, you've been traded to the Braves, da-da-da." And I'm telling him, like, "Dude, I can't play right now. My ribs are hurt. I can't play." So he was like, "Oh, you can't come up here with your ribs hurting, So I'm like, okay. So I decided to just go home to Tampa. So I go home to Tampa for a few days. And I'm taking some oral medicine and everything to help my ribs. So now I figured I stayed home for 3 or 4 days, and then I decided, okay, let me try to go to Atlanta, right? And so I tell myself, because I had driven to Atlanta before, so I tell myself, okay, Fred, if you leave about 12 o'clock from Tampa to get to Atlanta driving the speed limit, you're going to get there about 6 o'clock, right? And I know the game is 7 something, right? So there's no way you're going to be in this lineup if you get there around 6 o'clock. So that's what I did. I go and I leave at 12 and I get around 6 o'clock and I go and walk into that clubhouse and I look at that lineup and my name's in that lineup. Yeah. I'm like, oh boy, this is undercover, right? So the man upstairs is watching after me, and the press box catches on fire. And so now I got all this extra time to go into the training room, and the trainers are just working on my ribs and so forth because I'm in this lineup and everything. And the game didn't start till sinking 9:30, 9:40 at night, instead of the regular game. It started real late.
With Fred McGriff now in Atlanta and in the lineup, the stage was set. And in the minutes before the game's first pitch at 9:40 p.m., Joe Simpson and Skip Caray readied themselves for what was sure to be a broadcast they would never forget.
You know what? It was such a challenge that I think Skip and I both really embraced the challenge that we can do this. We'll make the best of whatever we have. I don't remember if we had full replay abilities, and I know we had monitors that we needed if we needed them, which is another testament to the technical people. But we didn't. There were no complaints. There was no griping, no whining. It was like, I'll be darned. We're going to be able to pull this off.
Hello again, everybody. Along with Joe Simpson, we're finally ready to play some baseball at Atlanta-Fulton County Stadium as the Braves and Cardinals will meet in Game 2 of this 3-game series. We've had a 2-hour fire delay here. The press box is a shambles, so we've moved down the club level, down the right field line. You see what caused our problems earlier in the day. And, Joe, I'm amazed that they're going to get this game started as quickly as they are.
Absolutely incredible. And a tribute, I think, to our folks, too, to be able to set this equipment up this quickly and get this game on the air for you folks also.
It's been sort of a, forgive me, but sort of a fire drill here the last few minutes, but you're right. Our people have done a great job, and I'll tell you what, we're doing Fred McGriff a disservice. I think everybody's pointing the finger at him. He can't hit 150 home runs and drive in 600 runs. He's going to need some help from some of his teammates.
He's batting cleanup in the lineup tonight, and hopefully he can help the other guys around him. And certainly around the press area, it's going to need a little help, too, in the days to come.
We opened on TV, and Pete and Don were on radio, and they weren't that far away from us, just a few feet away. And I remember looking over, and Pete had 2 cigarettes going. So he was a little bit on edge, maybe a little more nervous than we were. But maybe that's why his picture fell off the wall. He remembers having 2 heaters going at the same time. But it happened. We got it done.
And we're ready to go, and Fred McGriff is at his station. After the way this day has gone, I'm surprised he's not back in his car on 75 headed back to Tampa. Talked to him before the game, and he agreed he'll never forget his first day in a Braves uniform. Well, here we go. And Alicea takes the strike. 0-1, and we're underway.
And so, after all of the commotion and drama that had ensued on that evening at Atlanta-Fulton County Stadium, the game was finally underway and on the air. And, much like the players taking pictures on the field earlier in the day, the Braves broadcasters found plenty of opportunities to find a little humor in the whole situation.
But at first glimpse, it looks like Tom Glavine is really smoking tonight.
Oh, don't start. Don't start.
Pete Van Wieren, Don Sutton with you from club level box 207 here at Atlanta-Fulton County Stadium.
Well, they served chicken in the press room tonight, wound up a little extra crispy.
Here we go. I've always said I enjoy doing broadcasts like, a couple of fans sitting in the stands watching the ball game. Well, I got my wish tonight.
Yes.
I've already been hit by a bag of peanuts. Had Coke poured all over me. Pretty good feeling.
Poor baby. 1-2 the count.
The screaming that you may be hearing in the background is our official scorer, Mark Fredrickson, who normally speaks over a PA system in the press box, is now become the new town crier.
I went over there to check out the radio booth a little bit ago, and that fan I brought to help keep us cool?
That a $274 fan? Yeah.
Yeah, that's... Actually, I think it was a $27.40 fan.
High pop foul out of play.
I don't think we're going to be able to use it anymore.
No.
A little tough to take ground balls when a hook and ladder is parked right across home plate.
Sutton told me when he left the press area that he was actually feeling along the floor of the press area when he got to the outer door. It was that intense and that dark in our press room area. And it'll take him months to get the smoke out of his hair.
This is like the old days here. The PA man should have a megaphone.
While the Braves broadcasters were entertaining themselves and the fans at home by making jokes, the players on the field were busy doing what baseball players often do, looking for a competitive advantage. Greg McMichael.
They had to turn out a bank of lights, and so when you came out for the game and they said, "Hey, we're gonna try to get it in," and then we went out there, and of course, you go out to the bullpen and you're watching the game, you're like going, "Man, that's kind of odd." There's this whole bank of lights out behind third base. And I remember I pitched that night, so I remember it was a little bit different. Of course, I love those kind of things because it probably throws the hitter off more than it throws me off because I don't want him to see very well, right? So I'm trying to, it's like the shadow. Can the shadow just be right in between the mound and home plate all the time that I pitch? I would have been probably in the Hall of Fame if that would have happened.
The players and broadcasters weren't the only ones enjoying the uniqueness of the night. A group of Atlanta firefighters, still dressed in full uniform, had remained in the ballpark for the game after extinguishing the fire.
Foul back again. Good, the firemen are going to get themselves a souvenir. Yeah. They deserve it.
Yeah, they do. Got their own little section tonight.
Yeah, they're in tall cotton, aren't they?
They're getting a luxury box for free tonight.
That's right, but no vendors.
The Atlanta firefighters received a well-deserved ovation for their heroic efforts earlier in the day. But the biggest ovation in the ballpark that night was reserved for Fred McGriff as he walked up to the plate for the first time as a member of the Atlanta Braves.
A standing ovation for Fred McGriff as he leads off the bottom half of the second inning. And he tried to jack one right out of here, and he missed it 0-1. He's been around. He's a veteran player. But I'm sure he feels some butterflies. We've put so much pressure on this guy. It's really unfair. The 0-1.
One guy alone cannot make up the difference of 9 games. One guy can help other people around him and perhaps help them get some better pitches to hit.
Ground ball to first. Perry has it. He'll take it himself. In time, 1 down. McGriff gets a hand as he bounces out. That'll make him feel good.
Despite the fact that McGriff grounded out in his first at-bat, Braves fans were clearly still very excited to have him in the park and on their team. However, that excitement soon turned to despair as the St. Louis Cardinals struck first with the game's first run.
Lemke in behind the runner. Glavine goes to the plate. Little swinging bunt. Tommy off the mound in good shape. Going to have to hurry. Threw it low. It gets by McGriff. A run will score. Let's see how far Witten goes. He is racing for third. And it's 1-0.
And then they scored again.
Swung, grounded into left field. That scores the run.
And again.
Well hit to right field, but they had him played perfectly. Justice can't make the catch. It's over his head, and a run is going to try to score. He'll score easily. Pagnazzi is at second. I thought Justice would catch that ball, but it got over his head. And it's 3-0.
And again.
The 3-2, they run. Line drive, right field, base hit. A run is in. The other runner races to third. They missed the cutoff man, but Zeal is unable to move up, and he went the other way, and it's 4-0, and the Braves' problems continue.
And again.
Wild pitch. It pops right back. They got a shot at the plate. He is safe. Berryhill started to make the play himself, then decided to throw it, and on a bang-bang play, they beat the Rap. Gilkey has scored, and it's 5-0.
The excitement that had buzzed throughout the ballpark only an hour earlier was all but gone as the Braves found themselves in the midst of yet another poor offensive showing.
Well, it was very scary before the game, and now if you're a Braves fan, it's a little scary during it. The Braves have not been 10 or more out since the last day of the 1990 season. And they're not 10 out yet, but they're 9.5 at the moment and trailing 5-0.
As the Braves TV and radio broadcast teams prepared for their mid-game switch, Skip Caray signed off of the TBS telecast with a hopeful message.
Pete Van Wieren and Don Sutton will join you at the end of this half inning, and hopefully we'll do a more profitable job than we've been able to for you Braves fans.
As Skip and Joe moved to the Braves radio booth, Pete Van Wieren and Don Sutton, despite the score, happily settled into the TV broadcast.
We go to the bottom half of the 5th inning on what has been quite a night here at Atlanta-Fulton County Stadium. Pete Van Wieren and Don Sutton joining you now. It's been all Cardinals. And Don, good to see you. Good to see Skip. Good to see Joe. Good to see just about everybody after our little adventure tonight.
I'll tell you what, some people deserve some large bouquets and some medals of valor for the job that they did handling this tonight. And it was impressive. It's unfortunate that we did have the fire, but thank God nobody was hurt.
As the game moved to the bottom of the 6th inning, the Braves were in desperate need of something to turn the game around. After Mark Lemke led off the inning with a flyout, pinch hitter Bill Pacoda picked up a 1-out base hit to left. That brought Deion Sanders to the plate.
Ground ball headed to right field. It's a base hit for Sanders. 2 in a row, and the Braves with a little something going here in the bottom of the 6th inning. And it'll bring Jeff Blauser to the plate.
A mere couple of hours after having taken his now famous photograph, up to the plate stepped shortstop Jeff Blauser.
1-0 to Blauser. To left field. Deep. Back to the wall is Gilkey. Home run Blauser. A 3-run homer for Jeff Blauser, his 7th of the year. His 36th, 7th, and 8th RBI. And all of a sudden, the Cardinals are within shouting distance. It's 5-3. Still only 1 out in the bottom of the 6th. And here's Ron Gant. Base hit for Gant. That's 4 base hits in a row. And what better theatrics? Braves down by 2. And the hitter, and representing the tying run, newcomer Fred McGriff.
After a day full of drama and emotion that no one could have predicted, the weight of the world now seemingly rested on the shoulders of the newest Brave, Fred McGriff.
Let's see if McGriff can keep it going. To center field and deep. Back to the wall is Jordan. this is exactly why the Atlanta Braves went out and acquired Fred McGriff. He could run for mayor tomorrow and win. Or fire marshal tonight and win that in a landslide.
The sixth inning would end with the Braves and Cardinals tied up at 5, but the momentum in the game had clearly shifted toward the home team's favor.
The Braves send 10 men to the plate. They put 5 on the board. One big swing of the bat by McGriff, a 2-run homer, a 3-run homer by Blauser. And if you don't like this inning, you're a Giant fan. At the end of 6, we're tied at 5.
With the Braves having rallied to tie the game, everyone in the ballpark knew what a huge boost a game like this could provide. If they were able to win it, of course.
I think the acquisition of Fred McGriff gives the Braves belief. Remember the last 2 years, how memorable some of their wins were coming from behind? That has been a real struggle for Atlanta this year. And I think the bottom half of the 6th inning alone will show the rest of the members of the Braves ball club that, hey, we can still do that.
Oh, a win like this, if they can come back and win it, it's something that'll help you for weeks and even months.
As the game moved to the bottom of the 8th inning, the Braves and Cardinals remained all tied up at 5. After David Justice led off the inning with a single, third baseman Terry Pendleton stepped up to the plate, intending to bunt Justice to second.
Gets the bunt down this time, fielded by Cormier. He bobbles it, picks it up and throws, and Perry bobbles it. Everybody's safe. Here comes Justice. The throw home, safe. Braves lead 6-5. Cormier bobbled it, then Perry bobbled it. Justice comes all the way around to score, and the Braves have taken the lead.
With Pendleton still on base and pinch hitter Francisco Cabrera intentionally walked, Deion Sanders stepped back into the batter's box with a chance to provide the Braves with a little extra insurance.
Cabrera off first, Pendleton off second. And the 1-0 pitch on the way, and it's lined into left field for a base hit. Terry Pendleton gets the green light around third. Here comes Gilkey's throw. Pendleton safe. Go to second. They've got Deion Sanders hung up. Now Cabrera breaking home. The throw home by Perry. Cabrera safe. 2-run score. Perfect execution on the bases again by the Braves. 8-5 Atlanta.
And with that, all that was left was to put the Cardinals away in the 9th.
2 outs, 9th inning, 8-5 Atlanta. All the fans who are still at the ballpark on their feet now. On a night that we'll never forget, maybe the Atlanta Braves players won't either. This might be the springboard game they've been looking for a long time. 2-2, the count on Ozzie Smith. On the ground to short, Rafael Belliard has it on the first, and the Braves win after trailing 5-0. A 5-run rally keyed by a Fred McGriff homer, and then 3 runs in the 8th to give the Braves a come-from-behind victory and keep them 9 games back of the San Francisco Giants.
Tom Glavine.
You know, it was kind of a very fitting, kind of apropos, or an omen, whatever you want to call it. We ended up playing the game that night, and I was pitching. I didn't pitch very well, and we got behind. And sure enough, Freddie Mac, Crime Dog, who we got, that big trade, hit a big home run that night, and it really was kind of that kickstart to us, not literally, but figuratively, just catching on fire that second half of the year. So it was a pretty crazy night.
Joe Simpson.
It was amazing how everybody used that as the benchmark. Well, since the fire, the Braves have gone such and such, record-wise, and he was such a valuable addition to the club and a great person, and fit right in.
Ron Gant.
A lot of people said, I believe even Ted Turner said it was an omen. I mean, the stadium caught fire and so did we. I mean, that's the saying from that day. And, after that, we just blew everyone away the rest of the season.
Sportscaster Steve Taylor.
From that night on, the Braves went 51-17. the rest of the season to finish with 104 wins and win the division. So I guess the crime dog definitely made a difference.
Greg McMichael.
When John and Bobby went out and made that trade, and then all of a sudden Fred comes in and everybody's like, oh, we got Fred McGriff. I mean, Fred was like, at the time, he had multiple years of 30-plus home runs. So he was legitimate power hitter. I mean, it was we could have just as well gotten, Tony Gwynn or Barry Bonds. I mean, he was on that caliber of player. Of course, we know now he's going in the Hall of Fame, so he's right there with those guys. So I think anytime you do that with a team that's already really, really good, and then all of a sudden you put a bat like that in your lineup, it just psychologically you just turn things around, because now everybody else feels better that, okay, we got a chance now. Now, of course, we didn't know what was going to happen, but we knew that next day. And then, of course, he hits a home run the first game. Then that just kind of like cemented everything that we knew. Now, if he would have come in and struggled, over the next couple weeks, we probably would have the momentum would have been lost. But when you come in and all of a sudden, boom, he propels us to the first win. And then second, I mean, I can't even remember what our record was, but it was incredible down the stretch. But it all started with Fred coming in and getting hot. And with Fred being who he is, everybody just kind of just jumped on board, and all things. And that timely hitting we talked about, it just all clicked.
John Smoltz.
It ended up being a magical year after that for everything that started clicking. Of course, Fred McGriff was such a big part of our run, and that trade was so huge. But I'll never forget, I mean, it's just not normal to see a flame that high in the press box, to see the fire department come and put it out.
Fred McGriff.
For me to be able to hit a home run my first night in Atlanta, it was crazy, because, I wasn't sure I could swing or not, but to pull that off against the Cardinals was great stuff. And at the time, with us being 10 games back of the Giants, that was probably one of the best pennant races of all time.
1 week prior to the press box fire, Braves pitcher Steve Avery had a conversation with San Francisco Giants slugger Barry Bonds. The 91 and 92 seasons had both ended for Bonds in National League Championship Series losses to the Braves. This time, Bonds was feeling quite confident about his team's chances.
Everyone always said that kind of helped us catch fire, and I had made the All-Star game that year, so I was shagging in the outfield, and Bonds walked over to me and he said, "We finally got you after the last couple of years," because we had beaten them, 91, 92. So he felt like he had it wrapped up in 93, and it didn't quite work out that way.
And what became of the Atlanta-Fulton County Stadium press box? Well, it turns out that it also had a much better second half of the season. I.J. Rosenberg.
And Lord and behold, I mean, they got that press box cleaned up, and we were going out of town, as I remember. Can't remember exactly if we played the next day in Atlanta, but by the time we got back from the road trip, it was great, because the press box had gotten kind of nasty, and we had sort of a new press box.
For the players, broadcasters, writers, fans, and everyone who was at Atlanta-Fulton County Stadium on July 20th, 1993, it was a night that they will never forget.
I mean, you know what it would be like today? If smoke was coming out of the press box, we would be out of there. But the fact that these guys were taking batting practice, and this fire is raging. I mean, you see it in the photos, black smoke, flames, and everything coming out. And none of us thought, maybe we should go to someplace where it's safe.
Yeah, it was crazy. I mean, it was crazy, but who knew, the irony of it, and how hot we were going to get after that was pretty crazy.
That was a day you say to yourself, this is probably never going to happen again in baseball.
We hope you've enjoyed Behind the Braves Presents The Day the Braves Caught Fire. And be sure to check out other episodes of Behind the Braves featuring interviews with Atlanta Braves players, coaches, front office personnel, famous fans, and much more. Special thanks to Steve Avery, Ron Gant, Tom Glavine, David Justice, Mark Lemke, Greg Maddux, Fred McGriff, I.J. Rosenberg, John Schuerholz, Joe Simpson, John Smoltz, and Steve Taylor. The Day the Braves Caught Fire was narrated and edited by Ricky Mast and was brought to you by executive producers Greg McMichael and Ricky Mast.